Okay, so hello everybody. We're back again to do another recording. It's been a while since our last one, so we thought we should come back and share some more thoughts around allergen-related topics. And I guess, so last time we did some myth busting where we were thinking about common misconceptions and misunderstandings. And for this one, we thought we'd kind of follow on the same trend, as there is quite a lot of issues that we experience where we have the same kind of conversations with people where there is misunderstandings, confusions about certain things. So yes, we're going to come back to that again. So one of the things we see a lot, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, Barbara, is there is this general theme, this general misconception, we would say, that nuts are the most dangerous allergens and essentially they are the ones that will kill people. Whereas things like milk and soya and eggs, they're less dangerous. Now, unfortunately, that is not the case. In some ways, it might be easier if nuts were the only allergens that were responsible for fatalities. But we know for a fact that all of the allergens that we have on our list of 14 that we must declare, we know that all of those allergens can cause fatal reactions. So I guess it's something that's born out of the fact that nuts were previously the most understood and most widely studied of the allergens, but to say they are the only ones that kill people is very much not the case. Would you have anything to add to that, Barbara?
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you, Jess. I think it is a misconception today, and I think probably historically, as you say, peanut's been the most well-studied allergen that we know about, and therefore lots of focus was put on it. It's the thing that you hear in the news all the time. And of course, more recently, we've got a lot more clinical data. We've probably had a bit more press coverage of some other terrible fatalities that have happened that have not been about peanut, that have made it into the news. And now we have a lot more clinical data where people who are allergic to these different allergens have actually put themselves up for feeding studies very bravely to be fed the thing they're allergic to, so that we can learn and understand more about the potency of different allergens one to another within that specific allergic population. So I guess I agree with you entirely in manufacturing. I mean, it's quite rare now, I would say, Jess, to go into a factory where they handle nuts intentionally, unless they're either a nut processing factory, obviously they have them, and some particular types, so I guess desserts maybe, or some types of ready meals may well have nuts, or some kinds of bakeries. But lots of factories we go into, they very proudly announce to you, don't they, that we're a nut-free site. You're not allowed them anywhere near. You're not even allowed to bring them in as visitors. And yet I can't remember going into a factory that didn't have milk there, unless, to be fair, you do have some, of course, that are dedicated milk-free or dairy-free factories, but it's not common, is it? I can't imagine going to a ready meal factory that didn't have milk.
No.
And I guess also I'm thinking, I can't imagine what going on an aeroplane feels like anymore, but we've all forgotten, haven't we? But I can't imagine going on a flight where an announcement comes over to say, actually, we have somebody on the flight today who is very seriously milk allergic. Please do not consume, please do not touch, do not handle milk. No, I've been on a flight, certainly, with peanuts and nuts. I'm sure you have, Jess, as well. Yeah. And I know that they're trying to ban peanuts and nuts with some airlines. Anyway, perhaps we'll all remember what going on an aeroplane is like sometime. And in fact, certainly if you look at the FSA data and you look at the deaths that have happened in the last 12 and 18 months, and you look at the public recalls that we have with allergens, milk is by far and away outstripping peanuts and nuts in terms of serious allergic reactions, deaths, and also recalls. And it's just tragic. And I think we need to have as much focus on milk as we do on some of these other things, because clearly the fact you see all these recalls is we're clearly not perhaps controlling them as well as we might be. All the focus is on nuts and locking them away into cages. Can't remember ever going to somewhere where milk was locked away.
No, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, so that's thinking about nuts. I guess another hot topic, should we say, at the moment is thinking about issues with supply chain and challenges that the current situation has caused for a lot of businesses, food businesses, manufacturers, retailers. Making sure that supply chain is still working. And a lot of manufacturers maybe are having to switch to use new suppliers that they don't have that history with, they don't have that long-term relationship with, and trying to assess, potentially without actually being able to go onto their sites to actually physically audit them. They're trying to essentially assess them from a distance, which is really quite challenging. It's challenging enough as it is when you can go and visit them. So trying to do it at the moment without being able to do that is even more difficult. So yes, I thought maybe you'd want to share some thoughts on that topic.
Yeah, I mean, we're all meant to, aren't we, under the whole HACCP, TACCP, VASCP, thinking about threats and vulnerabilities and all of those good things. And, risk to supply chain would have been part of that. But I think with the best will in the world, some businesses might have thought about or tried to do a risk assessment around what would happen if we had a global pandemic. But I don't think many people would really have predicted the situation that we're in today. And I'm talking about globally. And the fact that, in the UK, it looks like we're sort of starting to get it under control, but clearly in other parts of the world, it clearly is not under control and is on the rise. And who knows what's going to happen in the next 2, 3, 6 months, a year. It's not going away anytime soon. So the impact on the supply of materials from different countries, different regions, possibly the restriction in the number of, workers and people to harvest and grow these crops. Borders are closed in some places. So it's really difficult. And as you say, Jess, having to move to a different supplier brings an extra level of challenge now because you can't do that physical auditing that you might have done before. You might be forced to use more agents and brokers than before, where you might not have been quite so wanting to do that, should I say. And that brings an extra level of, and really that's just about traceability. It's not suggesting that, agents and brokers aren't, perfectly good and everything, but you lose a layer of that traceability of working out, well, where did it come from? How do I know whether it's going to come in with something I don't want? In fact, we did a webinar. I think it was probably last week.
It was last Wednesday, in fact. Yes.
Was it last Wednesday? Well done.
24th of June.
Yeah, and I think we can probably send a link out to that
so
if needs be.
When we share this video on LinkedIn, hopefully we'll be able to actually have the link to that webinar with the video, where we talked a lot more about supply chain concerns, how to assess risks, potentially from a distance, and also we talked a lot about the testing considerations as well that you might need to be thinking about if you're assessing a new supplier. Particularly thinking about allergens, obviously, as our main focus, but also other claims like vegan, vegetarian claims and all that kind of good stuff. So yes, so hopefully we'll be able to share the link with this video. So coming back to thinking about other things that are sometimes misunderstood. So we know that a lot of manufacturers are using these things called vital levels when they're thinking about allergens. So Barbara, would you like to explain to us a little bit more about vital levels?
Yes, certainly. So vital, it's come from Australia and New Zealand originally. It's a voluntary incidental trace allergen labelling, to give its full title. And what we do know now is that we have a lot more information today than we did 5, 10, 15 years ago. And vital is based upon clinical feeding studies where those who are allergic to different allergens have actually been fed tiny amounts of the allergen across a whole population of those allergic people. And as soon as they start to get objective symptoms, clearly the feeding study stops. And from that, they can map out the whole population and they can work out at what point or how much of that allergen does about 1% of that allergic population start to have these objective symptoms. And that level is set as what they call the reference dose. Now, the reference dose is always in milligrams of the allergen protein. So if you see the number, for example, for milk, it's 0.2. that 0.2 is 0.2 milligrams of milk protein. Peanut is also 0.2. Hazelnut is 0.1. So it's about hazelnut protein, not the whole hazelnut. And that's the level at which we start to see reactions in 1% of the hazelnut allergic population. I guess the thing that I see most commonly, the two things that people get confused about is they see, I'm going to talk about hazelnut now, happens to be the thing I'm allergic to, but there we go. That 0.1 level is people get confused and think it's 0.1 parts per million. So if I'm going to test a food, and you might think that the safe level is 0.1 ppm, that is not what it means. So it's a finite total dose. If you're going to think about, well, what does that look like in terms of a concentration in the food, you have to relate it to how much food might a person eat at a single serving occasion, and therefore how much hazelnut might be in that, and is that going to be above or below the reference dose. So that's something that's misused, or misunderstood is probably a better way to use it. And the other thing about Vital is it's only applicable to a contamination that is homogeneously distributed. So if you're thinking about, let's say, milk powder in wheat flour, that would probably be evenly distributed, two powders mixed together. If you're thinking about hazelnut fragments in wheat flour, that's not evenly distributed. And you might imagine that one single fragment of a hazelnut might weigh more than 0.1 milligrams of the hazelnut protein. And therefore Vital is just not really applicable, because as an allergic individual, you might be what you might call unlucky, that you might eat the thing that's got the fragment of hazelnut in, whereas 99 other people might not. So I think that's for me where Vital gets a little bit mixed up.
Yeah, and
So we do spend time, don't we, Jess, working with customers to try and understand that.
It's very often, like you said, it's the confusion around the fact that the Vital level is milligrams of protein as a dose versus milligram per kilogram. So we'll often see, because obviously testing results are often reported as milligram per kilogram or ppm. So somebody might be working with that as their number that they're trying to kind of do calculations based on, but actually what they need to be doing is ensuring that they're thinking about the actual amount of protein, not just this milligram per kilogram result.
And also the units that you see on certificates, it's sometimes not obvious if it's hazelnut or hazelnut protein, is it? You may be, well, sometimes I'm starting to see things that are labelled as hazelnut allergen, and I'm like, what does that mean? I don't know. So we're often going backwards and forwards, aren't we, trying to get the clarity in that. So yeah, Vital, use it wisely. Use it carefully and use it wisely.
Exactly. And if you're not sure, then ask. Reach out to someone like us. We can advise on how it should be used.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Okay, well, I think that's all we've got time for today, really, isn't it? So
I think so.
It's been great chatting with you, Barbara, as always.
And you.
And yes, hopefully we'll be doing another one of these soon.
Stay safe, everybody, and yes, we'll speak again soon. Take care now. Bye-bye.
Bye.